Many years ago, in the mountains of Mull, there lived a shepherd and his wife who dreamt of nothing more than having a healthy, happy family. Soon the wife would be with child, and during her pregnancy, she would consult all manner of wise men and women on how to protect her child from the spirits of the other world and the sorcery of the evil eye. As the time of the birth came closer, the woman prepared her room. First, she fetched an iron sickle and lay it on the sill of the only window in the bedroom. Then she placed the big flat iron at the foot of the bed. And finally, she moved the kitchen table next to her bed and piled it with all the food they had in the house. After that, all she had to do was wait patiently for the child to arrive. Then on one night, some months later, the woman's labours suddenly began. She called her husband and sent him to the nearest village to fetch the howdie, or the local midwife. And so the man ran out of the wee bothy, down the hill and off towards the village. Yet it would seem that the shepherd's child was in quite the rush to arrive, and not long after the man had left, his wife gave birth to a healthy little boy. In no time at all, the bairn was covered in a thick plaid and held in the loving arms of his mother. But it was then that the strange voices began. Haunting speech from out of the darkness reached the ears of the new mother, and to her horror, these invisible beings were talking about the abduction of her child. "Quickly, take the infant," whispered one of the otherworldly voices. "How can I?" replied the other. "There is iron by the bed and by the window, and right there on the table next to the woman, butter made of the milk of the cow that has eaten the magic Mothan. We must go." With this, the woman heard footsteps echoing through her house, and the spirits were gone. It would seem that her diligence and knowledge had saved not only her, but also her child from an enslaved life beneath the hills in the realm of the Sidhe. The shepherd soon returned, and met his son for the first time, and to all accounts the family gained all that they had ever wished for. But now I am sure you are asking, what enchantments and charms kept the woman and her child safe? And more importantly, what is the magic Mothan? The Mothan is a plant which has been used in Scotland for thousands of years to aid in the production of cheese and butter, before it became an essential part of old traditions and superstitions as a ward for evil and the Sidhe or fairy folk. There are some disagreements as to which plant in specific all the mentions of the Mothan refer to, yet it is believed by the vast majority of botanists and researchers of ancient medicine to be the plant known as Pingulicula vulgaris, known commonly in Scotland as the bog violet, or in England and the Americas as butterwort. Now the Mothan is an insectivorous plant, which means it feeds on insects and worms. It accomplishes this by trapping creatures with a sticky substance that covers its leaves. Then the prey is broken down and digested through various enzymes excreted by glands found in the leaves. Due to its ability to gain nutrients from insects, it means that the plant does not require good quality soil to grow, and is often found in acidic and low nitrogen soil like moors or bogs. And this, along with its bright purple flowers, is how it came by the name of bog violet. The plant was incredibly important in Scotland, far before it was ever a ward for evil. You see, one of the many incredible properties of Mothan was its ability to curdle milk, which allowed for the production of butter and cheeses. The old Scots would harvest the bog violet and pour warm milk upon the leaves, before quickly straining the mix. The chemicals in the plant's leaves would over the next few days or so cause the milk to curdle until it became the consistency of thick cream. Then with this cream, the ancient people of Scotland could make butter and cheese, which could be kept far longer than milk, and allow them to store more calorie-dense food through the winter and the cold months. It's hard to describe just how necessary this plant was to Scottish life and the continuation of the old Celtic tribes. Something that I found particularly interesting was that this production method, using the Mothan leaves, did not take place that often, for it was said that one single spoonful of the cream mixture put in a pail of fresh milk was enough to turn it entirely to cream. This way, the people could continue to produce the new food without hunting or venturing into the dangerous moors and bogs that contained the Mothan plant. All of this incredible chemical knowledge was second nature to the old Scots, Picts and Gaels, not to mention many other ancient peoples from all over the world. Due to it being an essential part of life, it may not surprise you to know that the Mothan plant found its way into many superstitions and old traditions. The old Gaels, for one, believed that the cows which grazed upon the plant would be protected from evil and the fair folk. Many believed this protection would also extend to those who drank the milk of those cows, which can be seen in the tale of Black Norman. Many years ago, there was a great she-home under the hill at Dungarson in Bracadale. The fairies, or down-the-shee as we call them, would on occasion leave their hill and go abroad in the mortal lands to dance and celebrate below the stars. Now on one of these occasions, the night of Aithnahauna, a foolish man by the name of Black Norman came upon the open door of the fairy home. Seeing that no one was there, the man entered inside and began to pull large stones from the house wall, destroying it brick by brick from the inside. Soon the carved-out interior of the hill gave way and collapsed in upon itself. But luckily for Norman the Fool, he was already en route back to his farm with a wonderful collection of large stone bricks, which he intended to use to build a small barn. When the Shee returned, however, and found their home destroyed, they were spurred into a terrible anger and vowed vengeance upon the perpetrator. Within no time at all, the Shee used their vast powers and knowledge to detect the whereabouts of the stones. This led them straight to Norman, and it was around this time that the man began to hear an unearthly voice echo around his farm. "Throw the dart at Black Norman, throw the dart at Norman, throw the dart at Black Norman, who broke my harp string, who tore my harp, who put the bower in ruins. I cannot myself put him to death, I cannot myself undo him, I cannot go stealthily near him, or the milk of the cow that ate the Mothan in the folds of his throat." It would seem that our foolish Norman had been particularly fortunate on this occasion, and had unknowingly been drinking the milk of a cow that ate the Mothan, which seems to have saved his life, as when the morning came, the Shee decided to return to their own realm, and never return to bother Norman again. This shows that the fairies have an inability or a fear to draw near the plant, and is similar in many ways to the Fae's aversion to iron. This belief in the Mothan did not only exist in the superstitious Isles. It was also said that in Glen Uchart and Strathspey that the magical protection of the Mothan milk could also be found in the cheese which was made from it. This is remembered in a famous quote from Stuart's Highland Superstitions. "Go to the summit of some stupendous cliff or mountain, where any species of quadruped never fed nor trod, and gather of that herb in the Gaelic language called Mothan, which can be pointed out by any wise person. The herb you will give to a cow, and of the milk of that cow you are to make a cheese, and whoever eats of that cheese is forever after, as well as all his gear, perfectly secure from every species of fairy agency." This just goes to show how much power there can be in this small plant, and even traces of it within the cheese can protect a man from the wicked fae. it was widely believed in Scotland that the Sidhe were more prone to commit nefarious acts on specific nights of the year, like on Aithne Hauna in the Tale of Black Norman, and another was the first day of summer, the day immediately preceding the Festival of Fire or Baldna. So it became traditional to feed a small amount of Mothan to the cows before these days, not only to protect the herd, but also the families that relied on them for food. There can also be found the mention of rubbing the plant upon the cow's udders to protect it from evil. You see, it was common at the time to worry much about your cattle, as they were the source of your food and potentially all the wealth you owned. It was due to this that many people feared that their cows would lose their ability to produce milk. The Sidhe would steal the milk of a cow and consume it themselves, or use it to nurse their children, whereas witches would enchant the cows with charms and spells to stop their enemy's herd from producing milk. In some tales, this milk was even transferred to the witch's cow, or even the witch herself. This fear, I believe, is shown in a short tale found in the Carmina de Gallica. Once there were two cruel witches who felt slighted by a local farmer, and so decided to conjure through old and unnatural powers an enchantment to harm his herd of cows. The women were going to take all the goodness from the cow's milk and leave them dry. Now the pair's wicked intent proved to be wildly successful, and every single cow belonging to the farmer was completely barren of milk, save for one, a large brown cow that, unlike the rest of the herd, who had been grazing on the hillside, would more commonly be found in the moorland. And that brown cow had eaten the Mothan flower, protecting it from the evil eye and wicked charms. But this consumption of the bog violet, whether by humans or cows, was not its only use, and as time went on, the Mothan would be incorporated into all manner of superstitions and traditions. The flower of the Mothan was often placed above the door to a house, which would prevent entry to any Sidhe or spirits who may wish to do harm to the family. It could also be placed upon the right knee of a woman in labour, protecting her and her child from evil, and in some cases aiding a safe birth. Yet it was said for this practice to become totally effective, the woman would have to cast off all metal upon her body, such as rings or necklaces. In later years, this also meant wedding rings, which would make the use of the Mothan a practice that was frowned upon as the country became more Christian. Some very old Gallic texts even mention that the Mothan had the power to protect its owner against fire and flames, and on occasions this was used to safeguard homes as well. But how this old fire magic works, I'm not entirely sure, and I don't believe that I'm going to be the first person to test it. Sprigs of Mothan were often given or worn as a good luck charm, and there was even a saying in the Isles that when a man makes a miraculous escape from death, that he had drank the milk of the Mothan. Now the plant's ability to grant luck can easily be seen in the short passage from the tale of Red Roderick. It is told in the Isles that when Roderick, son of Ranald of Lewis, was on his way to be tried for murder, he met an old woman in Benbecula, who gave him a sprig of the blessed Mothan, which grew in South Uist. Consequently, Roderick was totally acquitted of all charges, although it was well known by the locals that he was guilty of the crime. Some time later, a relative of the old woman heard the story and asked of her, "Why give the Mothan to a man you knew to be guilty? Surely that could not be right." And this was the reply of the old woman: "O food and clothing, thou dear one of my heart, and thou loved one of my people, I could not myself go and refuse him. He beseeched to me, and he swelled to me, and he vowed to me, and he placed a thing in my hand. And O King of the moon, and of the sun, and of the beautiful sublime stars, what could I myself say or do? And the bad man in his black trouble, in his red difficulty, and in his hard plight." The woman pitied Roderick, and believed that this was the right thing to do, and I very much hope that she had more information on the subject than we do. Of course, this could always be to her benefit, as Clanranald of Lewis might have owned her land at the time. Even as far forward as the time of the Jacobite rebellions, we can still see the use of Mothan as a charm of protection and luck. The women of the time used to conceal the purple flowers within their clothes, and on occasion it was even placed inside the fabric before sewing. Many old Highlanders tell tales of soldiers all marching to war at Culloden, each with a small sprig of Mothan hidden about their person, in the hope it would keep them safe on the battlefield and allow them to weave through the musket fire. People would also tell of a kind of love potion that was made from the Mothan, a very popular thing for young women in the Highlands when in search of a lover, although you will soon see why lover may not be the correct term. It was told that the maiden must go and pick the bog violets while upon her left knee. Then she was to pluck 9 roots, or 3 threes, a special number in old Celtic lore. The plants would be knotted together and formed into a ring. The woman would then place the ring into her mouth and called on the power of the old gods, the gods of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now the enchantment was complete, and the ring could be taken out of the mouth and kept until she found a man that she would take. Now, should any man kiss that maiden while the ring of Mothan is within her mouth, he will become forevermore her bondsman, and in service to her until death. Whether for luck, or freeing oneself from the evil eye or the she, or even finding love, the Mothan plant has been used in Scotland for a great many years, and is now intrinsically part of Scottish culture. Thank you for listening, and a special thank you to my wonderful patrons for helping me keep these tales alive. I really enjoyed researching this plant and its many uses throughout Scottish history. It seems so wonderful to me that the simple Mothan has weaved its way through thousands of years and hundreds of generations, holding an important and special meaning to each and every one of them. One particularly strange bit of information I encountered while researching this topic was mentions of the plant in Christianity, where it was considered to be a holy plant, and said by many to be the first plant Jesus stood upon after he rose from the dead. And I genuinely have no idea where this comes from, and I cannot find any mention of it in biblical texts, although I have found multiple sources in old Scottish books stating this is so. It also seems strange to me that it was this plant in particular, as I don't believe it can be found anywhere in the Middle East. It was also said that the plant could only be harvested on a Sunday, and while harvesting, this specific prayer would be recited. I'll pull the butterwort, the herb blessed by the church. As long as I preserve the butterwort, nobody lives on earth who can take my cow's milk from me. An odd prayer if true, since it has no mention of God for one, and it seems to use the term butterwort, which historically has been the English name for the Mothan. Another odd tale in this same light was that the Mothan plant was personally blessed by Jesus, and that it would aid Christians forevermore. I did find other versions of this tale suggesting that the blesser was Saint Columba, and the blessing occurred in Scotland and was not done by Jesus himself. I struggled to find any concrete information on this part of the Mothan's history, although it is my speculation that this may be another example of the Church incorporating old and long-held Celtic beliefs into the Christian Church in order to more easily convert worshippers. And finally, I came across a more modern version of the love potion story, with somewhat less enslavement and availability to all sexes. It was said that a man or woman would go and draw the water from a holy or spiritually powerful well. Then they would immerse the leaves of the Mothan within the water as a kind of tea. But this tea would not be drunk. It would only be rubbed upon the lips of the one seeking a lover. And then, much like the other tale, Once kissed by these now enchanted lips, the person would fall madly in love with you. But the Mothan was only one of many plants given great cultural significance in Scottish history. There are others like the four-leaved clover, the rowan tree or mountain ash, St. John's wort and the holly bush, but perhaps I can talk about these another time. I hope you all enjoyed learning about the Mothan plant, and to be perfectly honest with you, this has been a video-sized side tangent about a plant that was briefly mentioned in another tale I was researching, so perhaps one day we will eventually get to that video, but until then, slán